was a little kid hanging out on the streets in our neighborhood, I had 3 other close friends, and we had come up with this game, and we simply called it What If. It's a game that we'd play if things were getting slow, and it would go something like this. We'd say, what if? You know, like, what if someone gave you $1 million? Or what if you were president? And then we would go around the circle, and everybody would give their answer, and the idea is that we would vote on who had the most creative response. Well, problem was that we were kids, and so we all voted for ourselves. And so there was never a clear-cut winner. But I had one of the friends was named Frankie Diatley. Frankie Diatley, his parents were both legally blind. They could see a bit, but they were legally blind. And so oftentimes when we would play the game, What If, Frankie would raise questions. What if you had to lose one of your senses? Which of the 5 senses would you least likely want to lose? Well, being kids, we would all say taste, because we knew that's not the answer Frankie was looking for. But then he would sharpen his question a little bit, you see, and he would say, all right, now, what if you had to choose either losing your sight or losing your hearing? Which would it be? And I suppose, you know, eventually we had one decent bone in our body, and we were sensitive to Frankie's parents' blindness, and so we would say, well, we wouldn't want to be blind. Well, one day, I don't know what I do know what got into me. It was the devil. One day, Frankie asked that question, and I said, I would rather be blind than lose my hearing. And Frankie said, no, you wouldn't. I said, yeah, I would. No, you wouldn't. Bet you wouldn't. I said, what do you bet? He said, candy bar. Well, that was about as good as it got, so I said, I'll take that bet. He said, I'll bet you can't last the rest of this day not being able to see. And that was the bet. I said, you're on. So we went over to his house. We got a couple of big wads of cotton, stuck them in my eyes, and then he got some of the most sticky tape you could imagine. And he wraps it around my head to the point, you ever tried to take sticky tape off your hair? I think I lost both my eyebrows and half of the right side of my hair. But, I mean, it was on there tight, and I couldn't see. Everything was about as dark could be. And I think maybe to this day, when I see a blind person out and about and they've got their walking cane and going back and forth, something inside me just goes out to them. And I'm so taken by the courage and the strength to do what they need to do to get about. Well, Frankie took the tape off and took the cotton out of my eyes. I looked at my watch and it was only 15 minutes. But you know, being able to have your sight, that's a pretty good thing. Pretty good thing. There was that blind beggar sitting by the side of the road, and he was begging for coins to support himself. And he did this every day, you see, and there were others around, so he try to do what he could do. But he was trying to raise some money to support himself. And one day, you know how when you lose one of your senses, the others get a little bit heightened? Well, this was one of those days because he really understood that the crowd, there was an excitement in the crowd. And he heard something different that day, and he began to listen more closely. And he said, "What's going on? What's happening?" And the other people said, pipe down, pipe down. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming to town. Jesus is coming." He said, "Oh my." He said, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." He kept crying out like this. "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Well, Jesus heard him and called him. He said, "Bring him to me." And they brought him to Jesus, and Jesus asked the magic question. "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said, "Oh, Jesus, Son of David, I want to receive my sight. People tell me about the skies and the sunsets and the babies, and I just want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Your faith has made you well." You see, the thing was, Bartimaeus kept crying out, "Jesus, Son of David." Now, that may not mean a lot to us, but back then, and in a Jewish community, that was a messianic title. Do you understand? The blind man was the one who could see who Jesus was. The disciples couldn't. Jesus had been knocking himself out trying to get the disciples to understand. They could see, but they couldn't understand. But this blind man who couldn't see did see. He saw what was most important. He saw that Jesus was the one they had waited for forever. Which would you rather have? Would you rather have biological sight? Or would you like to see through the eyes of faith? That's not an easy question, is it? It's not an easy question. Of course, we all want to be able to see biologically. But don't we yearn to understand and to see through the eyes of faith? How many of you are baseball fans? Yeah? Okay. World Series just ended this week. So I thought I might tell you a story. Anybody ever heard of a man named Jim Joyce? One. Marty's the historian. Anybody ever heard of Armando Galarraga? Denny, Marty, Chuck. So I want to tell you this story, but first of all, I have to give you a little bit of backdrop. Major League Baseball has been playing for 154 years. That's older than I am. There have been almost 250,000 games played, which means that there were about 500 starting pitchers, right? One on each team. 500,000 pitchers. And in the history of baseball, there has only been 24 perfect games. 24 perfect games. That's it. Now, somebody asked me between services, well, isn't a no-hitter a perfect game? No, it's not. You can have a no-hitter, but if you walk someone and they end up on first base, that is not a perfect game. That is a no-hitter. A perfect game is where you retire all 27 batters, either by, well, let's put it this way. They don't get on first base by either being hit, a wild pitch, pass ball, a walk, or a hit, or any of that. They never get to first base. You retire all 27. That's called a perfect game. It's only happened 24 times in the last 154 years. It was June 2nd, 2010, at the Detroit Tigers Park. And the Tigers were playing the then Cleveland Indians. It was bottom of the ninth, 2 outs. And Jason Donald, the shortstop, came to bat. Galarraga pitched to him, and he hit a sharp grounder towards first base. The first baseman moved to his right to take the grounder. Galarraga, the pitcher, raced to first base to take the throw, which is what he did. First baseman flipped him the ball, and he tagged the base a half a step before Donald reached first base. A rare, perfect game was all but in the books, except that umpire Jim Joyce called the runner safe. They didn't have instant replay in those days. The perfect game was lost. After the game, Joyce reviewed the replay, and he admitted that he had blown the call. You see, he had a blind spot. He couldn't see. He couldn't see, and he made a human mistake. I felt a sort of strange kinship with Joyce over the years. I'm in his corner, not just because he made a mistake, but precisely because I make mistakes all the time. Take a couple of minutes with Karen after service. I just don't make them in front of the whole universe like Jim Joyce did. If you think about it, you and I are a lot more like Jim Joyce than we are Armando Galarraga. I mean, how many of us are really perfect? Well, there are a couple of you that I think are pretty perfect. But when was the last time you turned in a perfect day as a parent or as a grandparent, as a daughter, as a mother, a father, a son, a neighbor, a church member? None of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. If Armando Galarraga had just pitched his perfect game and no dispute arose, it would have been impressive enough, right? 1 out of 24. But for those of you who don't know, once Jim Joyce looked at the replay and realized he had blown not just a call, but a historic call, he contacted Galarraga right away to apologize. Can you guess? Galarraga said to him, "Don't worry about it. We all have blind spots. We're just human." I don't know how that hits you, Barb, but that hits me. Right, Marion? That hits me pretty strong. We're just human. We all make mistakes. But I've got a question for you this morning. What do you think's more perfect? 27 outs in a baseball game or seeing through the eyes of faith? Because you can bet that exchange changed a couple of lives. Wow. May God bless you. And may God bless our dear United Church of Marco Island, where if it wasn't for the good grace of God, none of us would see it all.